A comedy roast that was supposed to be entertainment has now turned into a massive cultural controversy that is spreading across social media, podcasts, and entertainment news. At the center of this storm is Kevin Hart's Netflix roast, a George Floyd joke that triggered backlash, and comedian DL Hughley stepping into the conversation with strong criticism that has only intensified the debate. What started as a comedy moment has now become a larger discussion about boundaries, free speech, and responsibility in modern comedy.
Right, so a lot has been made about the Kevin Hart roast on Netflix, particularly a joke that Tony Hinchcliffe told about George Floyd. I find it ironic that a comedian who appeared at a Nazi rally for Trump a couple of years ago and told a very incendiary joke would end up with that was in Jumanji.
From the very beginning of the discussion, the tone is clear. This is not just about comedy anymore. The situation has expanded beyond jokes and performances and entered the real world where people are questioning what is acceptable and what is not. The controversy is growing rapidly, and audiences everywhere are trying to understand what exactly happened during the Netflix roast that caused such a strong reaction. The conversation begins to focus on Kevin Hart and the environment surrounding his roast appearance. A joke involving George Floyd has become the center of criticism, and many viewers are expressing discomfort and anger over the material presented on stage. While some argue it was simply part of roast comedy, others believe it crossed a serious emotional and moral line. This division is now driving the entire discussion.
I just don't think those audiences match, but this is comedy, you can do whatever. The spirit of a roast, I remember years ago when it was the Dean Martin roast, you got the sense that those people liked each other. Those people had an affinity for each other, that it was kind of tongue-in-cheek. I don't get that sense at all. You are entitled to tell a joke, but it cannot be just jokes when the very audiences that support that kind of comedy got upset when someone said anything about Charlie Kirk. As I recall it, there were calls made to try to get people fired for just saying anything about Charlie Kirk.
This is where DL Hughley enters the conversation. Known for his outspoken opinions, he becomes one of the most vocal critics reacting to the situation. His response is not emotional outrage alone, but a structured criticism of how comedy is being used today. He begins to question the standards of the industry and why certain jokes are defended while others are heavily criticized. DL Hughley highlights what he sees as a major contradiction in modern entertainment culture. According to him, comedy is often defended as free speech, but that defense is inconsistent. When jokes benefit certain audiences or figures, they are accepted. But when they target sensitive topics or powerful individuals, backlash follows immediately. This inconsistency, he argues, is one of the core problems in today's comedy landscape.
It cannot be just jokes when the current president of the United States of America is trying to get a comedian fired for telling a joke he didn't like and using the power of the FCC to do it. It can't be just jokes when the aforementioned man got so offended that, again, he's trying to get people fired, but he depicted Obama and his wife as apes. So jokes are fine, and I will defend the right to say whatever you want, but it is not a one-sided thing. And decidedly, there are people we've seen 3 times when this president, and who I would say the same people that like Trump, like these comedians. Same people. Now, how is it that you call it, when you do it, it's called comedy?
He continues building his argument by pointing out how reactions to comedy depend heavily on who is involved. In his view, audiences and public figures often switch positions depending on the context. This creates a situation where comedy is not judged by the same standard across the board, leading to frustration among comedians who feel restricted or unfairly criticized.
When they do it, a joke that you don't like about somebody you don't like is something entirely different. I don't understand how those audiences meshed. I think I respect the right for anybody to say whatever it is they want to say. This is comedy. And, but it cannot be a one-sided street. It cannot be a one-sided affair. And let's be clear. When any white guy wants the freedom of speech, when they are yelling for freedom of speech, when they are clamoring for freedom of speech, they really want the freedom to be able to say.
At this stage, the debate shifts deeper into the philosophy of comedy itself. DL Hughley questions how society defines humor and who gets to decide what is acceptable. He suggests that what is considered just a joke in one situation becomes unacceptable in another, even when the content is similar. This inconsistency creates confusion about the true limits of comedy. Now, the opposing argument is presented. Supporters of the roast format argue that comedy roasts are designed to be offensive and uncomfortable. They believe that anyone participating in such an event should expect controversial jokes and not take them personally. From this perspective, the entire purpose of a roast is to push boundaries and create shock-based humor. However, DL Hughley draws a clear line when it comes to sensitive topics. He argues that while comedy is meant to push boundaries, there are subjects that carry real emotional weight and should be treated with care. According to him, not everything should be turned into a punchline, especially when it involves real-life tragedies that are still deeply impactful. The conversation then expands beyond the roast itself. It begins to reflect on Kevin Hart's position in the comedy industry and how his influence affects the perception of the entire event. Critics argue that because of his status, anything associated with him carries more weight and scrutiny. This makes the situation even more controversial as reactions continue to build.
Holy shit, Cat Williams, insane. The shock factor kept being there. Cat's set was insane. There's no emotions attached to a roast. You get up there, you tell your jokes, and we understand that they're going to come with some heat, but that's what a roast is supposed to be. You can't have emotions. You got to understand what the assignment is, man. Everybody came out there and did their thing. To all the fans that just understand and appreciate what a roast is supposed to be. You got that. Got that yesterday. No emotion. No emotion, no feelings, man. It's not what a roast is about. Leave the emotions and the feelings at the front.
At this point, the focus shifts to the nature of comedy production itself. The idea of Netflix hosting such a roast brings attention to how major platforms handle controversial content. While comedy is meant to be expressive, distribution on global platforms means the content reaches audiences with very different sensitivities, increasing the potential for backlash. Defenders of the roast emphasize that emotional detachment is part of the format. They argue that participants agree to be roasted and should not expect emotional protection. In their view, comedy loses its essence if emotional limits are imposed too strictly. However, critics disagree, saying that emotional impact cannot simply be ignored.
How Cat Williams tried to tell us a long time ago about Kevin Hart. Everybody just wanted to laugh, they didn't want to listen. And y'all see how he was the only one at that roast who was roasting the out of him to his face, calling him he's a whole jigaboo, a bootlicker. That man took every role that Cat Williams turned down. Why? Because he's tired of comedians making black men look bad. Stop accepting these roles just for a little bit of coin. But see, it shows y'all true character, that most of y'all can be bought.
Despite defenses from both sides, the backlash continues to grow. Kevin Hart remains at the center of criticism due to his reaction during the roast. Some viewers believe his response contributed to the controversy, while others argue that the entire situation is being exaggerated beyond its original context.
Can someone tell me what was funny about that white man getting up on that stage talking about some George Floyd is looking up at us right now, laughing so hard that he can't breathe?
Ari Spears, J. Anthony Brown, and a plethora of other black comedians are under the comments on Black Women's Post talking about it's just a roast, because some black women felt like the anti-black jokes at Kevin Hart's roast were inappropriate, especially right now with all of this congressional redistricting and all of this racism going on. Racist jokes are not funny to the rest of us, but
now the conversation expands to other comedians and public reactions. Different voices from the comedy community begin weighing in, showing that this is not an isolated disagreement. Instead, it reflects a broader division within the entertainment industry about what comedy should and should not include.
It's always gonna be funny to a bunch of it's always gonna be funny to niggas that need, some of them people's money like that enough to let them play in their face like that.
Here's my take on the backlash from the roast. I respect people who are sensitive. I don't respect the hypocrites, and that's the vast majority. That's what pisses people off. That's what comedians are fighting against. It's the hypocrisies. Everything be funny, is ha-ha, kiki, until it's your group or somebody you like or something you care about, then it ain't funny no more. Nah, that's whack. That's whack as hell. Either be offended by all of it.
Here, the debate becomes more serious as it touches on race and societal sensitivity. Some argue that certain jokes cannot be separated from historical and cultural context. Others believe comedy should remain unrestricted regardless of subject matter. This tension continues to define the conversation.
Which is fine. Then maybe you probably shouldn't watch roast if you're one of those people. Probably shouldn't go to comedy shows if you're one of those people. Or you got to let all of it ride. But what y'all like to do is pick and choose which things you want to be mad at, and that's whack.
It's one thing to roast the people that's there. It's one thing to roast the people that may be in the audience there. Roasting somebody that, number one, is dead. Number two, that's not there. Number three, that the implications of why you should joke about that. Like Tony Hinchcliffe joke about George Floyd didn't make fucking sense to me.
DL Hughley concludes this part of the argument by calling out what he sees as hypocrisy in public reactions. According to him, people often support comedy freedom until it affects something personal. This selective reaction, he argues, is the real issue behind ongoing comedy controversies. The criticism intensifies as he reiterates his concern about the use of sensitive topics in comedy. He believes that certain references carry emotional weight that should not be reduced to entertainment. This becomes one of the strongest emotional points in the entire discussion. Supporters continue defending the roast format by emphasizing audience expectations. They argue that comedy is meant to be unpredictable and that audiences voluntarily participate in this experience. However, critics maintain that participation does not remove moral responsibility. As the discussion comes to an end, the consequences of the controversy are still unfolding. Some believe Kevin Hart's reputation has been affected, while others think the backlash is exaggerated. What remains clear is that this moment has sparked one of the most intense comedy debates in recent memory. This is no longer just about a roast. It has become a reflection of how comedy, culture, and sensitivity collide in today's world, and the debate is far from over.